Hi everybody, welcome back to another episode of my Dungeon Boss FAQ series. Today we are going to be taking a look at the drop rates of totems on Boss Island. This was a question that I got in Gen Chat, not directly towards me, but one that I chimed in on one day, and I want to express my opinions on it in terms of whether or not drop rates are better if you run the dungeon manually or if you run it with a quick loot. Now everybody knows that quick loots on Boss Island cost 8 loot keys, so some people have been of the impression that because it takes 8 loot keys, it's actually better to quick loot than to run it manually because it's going to give you a little bit better drop rate. So that's what we're ultimately looking at comparing today. So over the course of probably 4 weeks or so, I tabulated results pretty much nonstop. I ran these as much as I could, and if you've ever tried to collect data, running these 40 times each, that's 200 dungeon runs of Boss Island manual runs. So I mean, it takes a little time to do so, and then you have to tabulate each individual result, whether it's a positive or a negative, and that's what resulted in this nice little graphic here. So to make this a little bit easier, I have broken it down into each of the individual dungeons. So first up, we'll look at Savage Grove. Largely, Savage Grove started off negative, but then it went on a nice little positive slope until it ultimately evened out over the last 15 or so runs, which a lot of the ones that I was doing, it ended up, it was very rarely where it was heavily skewed in one direction or the other. One thing to keep in mind here is I noticed that it does go in spurts. So in some of these cases, I only did a few runs at a time, had to stop, and then I picked them up the next week or on that weekend when all of the dungeons are available. So not all 40 of these are in a row, which in my opinion kind of skews the results a little bit because I didn't make note of where the actual session started and stopped, which could account for some of the massive slopes that we see in some of them. Particularly if we look at this one here on Lava Academy. Starting at run number, it looks like number 11, we have our longest streak, either positive or negative, out of any of the results that I had. And in order to get a streak of 5 like this, if it is a 50-50 drop rate, it's a 1 in 32 chance. Now, being that I did 200 runs total, I would have expected a few more streaks like this. Specifically, if I did 40 runs, we'd almost expect a streak like this once per 40 runs, but that wasn't really the case for any of the other ones. If we look at Permafrost, Permafrost was actually the only one that balanced out evenly. It doesn't really look like it from here. It looks like it's got a lot of peaks and valleys, but if you look at the start and the finish, it ended at a net gain of 0, which was a perfect 50-50 drop rate. This was the only dungeon that actually did that. If we look at Babel, Babel was largely successful as well to start out, and then it balanced out in the long run as well. And then Pestilent Spiral is also the only one that was mostly negative throughout the entire run, and then it finally picked up. I can't remember where the breaks were in this one, but I know that when I ran the first few, it was just loss after loss after loss, and by loss I mean basically just not getting the totems. So ultimately what we're going to do is we're going to compare this drop rate to quick looting. Based on what I see here and based on the numbers, I'm pretty comfortable saying that this is a 50-50 drop rate, so right around 50%, because hardly any of these, we don't know if these are a sufficient number of trials. 40 is obviously a little bit lower. We're going to be doing more with the quick loots, but over the course of 40 trials, it's pretty close to right on 50%. So I would say that with a high level of certainty that you can expect a 50% drop rate if you do a sufficient number of trials. So what we're going to do here is we're going to take a look at quick loot and see how that actually stacks up then. Okay, so before we get into running our quick loots in the Boss Island, we need to first see how many totems we actually have, because it doesn't pay to do a whole bunch of runs if we don't know how many actual totems we got. So let's take a quick look at our crafting menu here and totems. I'm going to be running Pestilent Spiral. So I currently have 17 of the Shadow Totem. So we're going to be running an even 100 dungeons. So realistically, if we run 100 dungeons and there is indeed a 50% drop rate, I'm going to expect to see 50 of these totems, which should give us a total of 67. So that'll be really easy for us to tell if we met that 50% threshold, or if it's less, or if it's more. So might get a little bit boring in the next couple of minutes here, but we have plenty of loot keys to go around. We have 500 stamina, which will cover exactly 100 runs. Normally I would not advocate for blowing through your loot keys like this, but every once in a while you do need to spend them because you need to use them eventually. But a lot of people will probably be better off using those loot keys when events come around. But if you remember just from a few seconds ago, as far as totems go, my shadow totems are really lagging behind, and I'd like to get that last level 12 on Shadow Blades epic, and I gotta get some totems to do that. So let's go ahead and just start quick looting here. I'm basically just going to go through it as fast as I can. Don't worry about counting these things right now. We had the start. We knew that there's 17 to begin with, and we knew that the proposed rate was 50% based off of my previous trials with manual running. So really, as we've gone through some of the physical runs, people have asked whether or not it's better or worse to do the quick loot, and that's basically what we're doing right now. Personally, I would assume that if the drop rate is 50% in regular dungeons or in regular run-throughs, I would assume quick loot probably isn't going to change that. So, fun little fact as far as running these, what I did notice, and I didn't do any mass quick loots like this before, but when I was running the actual dungeons, things that I've noticed were the drop rates seem to be tied to what I'm going to consider a session. So if you do a whole bunch of them in a row, it seemed to maintain that 50% a lot better than if you ran, let's say, 15 of them, called it quits for the day or for the week, and then came back the next week and ran another 15. So every time you broke that up, this is similar to what we see with those people that used to use the airplane glitch. They would basically re-roll runes or do whatever they have to do to cheat. Oh shoot, looks like I have runes to get rid of here. Sorry for the delay here. Just like that, it throws a wrench in my video. Something like that always seems to happen. So bear with me for just a moment here. But anyways, like I was saying, the airplane glitch, people would use that to cheat, and I've never really gotten on board with that. And I'll admit it, I have tried it before, and it didn't seem to work the way I expected, and it was kind of a pain to do, but I'm not going to get into that right now. But basically what that amounted to is when you would run it and you didn't get an outcome that you liked, you would back out and you would do something to change up the RNG, and that's basically what this concept was too. So I felt like if you left the dungeon area and went and did some PvP, or you did another dungeon, then came back, it seemed like the refresh rate reset a little bit, or the drop rate refreshed a little bit. So I don't know if that's true or if it's intentional, but that's what I've noticed when I did my testing. And I did a lot of testing over all 5 dungeons over the course of probably a month or so. It took me a while to run those things, but I definitely got some good hard data. So we can see this is going nice and slow. I wish there was a way that we could just instantly quick loot as much as we wanted, but we're just going to keep on trucking here. I don't really have much other commentary to offer here. I know a lot of people are just ultimately wondering what the number is going to be, so I certainly won't hold it against anybody if they fast forward. But we're just going to keep on keeping on. So Like I said, normally I wouldn't advocate spending your loot keys like this because it does cost 8 of them, but um, the best time to do this, in my opinion, like I said, the event dungeons is usually when you'd want to do it if you're trying to farm materials. When you get the 3 times material event, that is almost always when I do the quick loot. And I'm not even joking, I'm sure like the very weekend, which is at this point, I'm recording this on a Thursday night. My guess is the first weekend after I record this, so Friday night and Saturday, there will probably be a 3 times event, and I'll be now out of stamina, and my loot keys will be completely spent. So that would be kind of my luck. I tend to have luck like that every now and then. But save your loot keys and try and hover around that 900 mark until you get the 3 times events, because if you get the 3 times event weekend and you get it on an actual weekend where you can do any of the Boss Island dungeons, you can really get quite a few of those totems and really work on those epics. So for me, I've been running just basically I have my auto run team set up, and I just leave my phone on my desk at work and just let it go. And that's been how I've been getting most of my totems as of late. And kind of interesting, I've been doing really well on totems, but I can't level up some of my epics because I'm missing some of the total noob type mats, like the mandrake roots and stuff like that. It's not even the pyre embers that I'm out of, it's just some of the other stuff that you just get from running basic campaign or challenge mode, and I'm just missing a bunch of those. So it's actually kind of a pain when I actually have all of the stuff to level up some epics, but I can't craft something like a fire etched bar or something like that because I don't have the basic parts for it. So kind of interesting that get all these tokens and you still can't level up. Alright, so we gotta dump some runes again. At least we got some dark runes, so we're getting a lot of runes out of this. Fortunately they're all graders too, but I should have just did a mass delete before all this, but I was expecting more materials. I guess should be enough to finish off here. Alright, try this again. We're down to 40 more runes. I could still get 40 runes, really. If you've ever tried to spend 500 stamina, it takes a while. It sure does. But at least I'm getting some of those little crystals. I probably don't need any of them, to be honest. I need the little red crystals. Getting some hammers, which are also worthless. I don't even use those in my dungeon anymore. They revamped hammers a little bit, but they're still pretty stupid, so I keep them in the event that they open up a hammer shop, but I really don't expect that to happen, but you never know. It's the same thing with hoarding all of my Aether. I feel like as soon as I spend it, there's going to be a new legendary hero that comes out, and here I'm going to be left with like 600 Aether instead of however many thousands, and last thing I want to be is behind, so just keep on saving. I'm a very big stickler when it comes to saving, so that's just how I play, though. Man, I cannot believe how slow this is. So on a side note, I could have done this 500 stamina on the permafrost ice cavern or ice cave with the Stone Fist epic, but I had plenty of the blue totems. I really wanted to catch up on my shadow ones. It would have been good for bauble tokens because there's a quest going right now for beat 20 of the ice dungeons and you get a couple of bauble tokens, and if we would have done 100 I would have gotten 5 of those quests, which would have been only 10 bauble tokens, so it's not a big deal. I'm much more interested in these shadow totems than anything. Almost done though. We are almost there. So I'm excited to see what the results are here because I've done plenty of quick looting before. Like I said, when the times 3 events come out, I've done plenty of quick loots, and there have been times when it felt like the drop rate on quick loot was closer to 40% than it was to 50%. So I'm quite interested to see what it actually is. So, and if it's because we're doing 100, we should get a pretty rough percent, and it should be accurate within probably a couple percent. What I'm curious if it's right around 50 or if it's closer to something like 60. Alright, we got 3 more. This is going to be embarrassing because I've not been out of stamina for a very long time. So this is new territory for me. Alright, we'll see if our last one is a success. It wasn't. Okay. The second to last one was, though. So we started off this grand adventure with 17 of those totems. Remember, our goal was to get to 67, which would have proved, without a doubt, that there's a 50% drop rate. So, craft, materials, come on, totems, craft, 73. So, I would normally just do this in my head, but I'm going to use a calculator. 73 minus 17 is 56. So, roughly, if we wanted to guess, we're roughly at about a 50% drop rate when you quick loot. So the drop rate is basically the same as when you run the dungeon manually. We have pretty much our proof here. What we're ultimately looking for is to make sure that it's above 50, and we did get 6 more than that. So basically 1 out of every 20 or so, we got an extra one in there, just so in the grand scheme of things, is it closer to 55%, 55, 56, 50? I mean, those are all pretty much the same. I would say in confidence that it's probably 50%. The fact that they would put it at 55% seems a little bit unlikely. It's just such a weird number. Why not make it 75, or why not make it 60? And I guess it is technically closer to 60 than 50. But based on my evidence with the actual slow running it, being right almost spot on to 50 every single time, I'm confident that it's a 50% drop rate. So we should have conclusive evidence there that the drop rate for totems is 50%. I do not believe it's going to change for any dungeon, so keep that in mind. But if you have any questions or things you would like to test out, feel free to let me know. I'm happy to do data analysis and research. These things are sort of my jam, so just let me know. Otherwise, thanks for watching. Thank you so much for watching this video and supporting my channel. If you like this video, please show your continued support by hitting that like button, and be sure to check out both my YouTube channels for new content all the time. And always remember, peace is a lie, there's only passion. We'll see you next time.